I'll be moderating today's presentation from enCore Energy. I want to welcome William Sheriff, Executive Chairman, and Paul Goranson, CEO. We'll be doing a brief presentation today and providing an update following the Azarga shareholder vote. You will have the opportunity to ask questions, and there is a tab on the dashboard that would allow you at any time to insert questions. If you ever do need to reach me during the presentation or having any technical problems, please use the chat function. And with that, I will hand it over to Bill to begin, and Paul will follow. I will surface again and handle the questions following the presentation. Thank you again for joining us today. Your time is valuable and we do appreciate it. And with that, Bill, take it away.
Thanks, Janet. Thanks everyone for attending this morning. Obviously a very exciting time for us as the merger between enCore and Azarga has been confirmed by well over 99% of the voting shareholders of Azarga. It really is a key fundamental acquisition for enCore. As you probably know, most of you have seen our presentation or have talked to us, familiar with the company, but we have short-term production, almost turnkey in Texas, and then we have control of the largest uranium district in the U.S., that being New Mexico, which has an endowment in the hundreds of millions of pounds, and but it's a bit further out on permitting. So what Azarga did is it fit us like a glove in terms of dropping key projects into that production pipeline, namely Dewey, Burdock in South Dakota, and Gas Hills in Wyoming. I will be making some forward-looking statements, and so the key here is we're looking to be a diversified ISR development company. All of our focus is in ISR in the U.S., and we obviously got kicked off with 2 licensed processing plants in Texas. This is 2 of only 11 that are in the U.S. The turnkey production capabilities in Texas, we are renovating the Rosita processing plant, modernizing it. That work's underway. Paul will talk to you a little bit about that in the coming moments, but essentially the work will be done by the second quarter, and we're spending under $1 million to bring it up to full modernization. Wellfield development will commence after that, and production in 23. From there, we'll go on to the Dewey Burdock project in South Dakota, which does have a substantial amount of federal permitting under its belt, and we look to advance that with the combined horsepower of the 2 companies. We think we'll make better progress than we've seen in the past, and we've got that slotted in a rough timeline for production as well. The pipeline project at Gas Hills, Wyoming, equally compelling in terms of economics to Dewey Burdock. Here again, Paul will run you through those. And the permitting will start on that almost immediately. Certainly before the end of the year, the discussions will begin on that. The significant uranium endowment of New Mexico, as I spoke to you about, all of this combines with a measured indicated resource of 90 million pounds, an additional inferred resource of 9 million. Historic resources largely compiled by oil companies during the 1970s primarily, name brand oil companies, almost an equal amount. We are systematically converting those historic resources into 43-101. Currently have 2 43-101s underway, and we'll systematically do that. You can look for roughly 1 43-101 every quarter, at least 3 of them a year, and that will systematically bring all those resources up. Obviously, you're all, I'm sure, aware of the nuclear renaissance, the political tailwinds we have, and the big movement towards green and carbon conscious development. And the only way you can get there in terms of the green energy and the carbon is, of course, with nuclear power. Wind doesn't blow all the time, the sun doesn't shine all the time. So anyway, we've also based our company on strong management and personnel with the deep experience in ISR that I think second to none in the industry. You can see how that history of the company, even though it's relatively new in the headlines, we've been around for a long time, having come out of Energy Metals back in 2004 to 2007 timeframe. And Paul's background, of course, was with Mustania building the Alta Mesa plant at that time. Incidentally, that plant was built in under a year for under $12 million. It just shows that the real efficiencies inherent in the ISR business, low capex, low opex, and very quick in terms of permitting and reclamation when compared to conventional mining. enCore came into existence after the Uranium 1 timeframe, and Paul went on to serve as president of Cameco. And we were basically in hiatus at enCore until just about 16 months ago, at which time we purchased the Westwater Resources, which formerly was Uranium Resources, the uranium holdings, which gave us the Texas and New Mexico, and then currently having an affirmative vote to proceed on Azarga. So we'll be looking to close that up quickly. Just to give you a snapshot of where we stand, roughly the two companies combined will be a $500 million market cap, about $20 million in the bank. That does include physical inventory currently of 100,000 pounds. We don't necessarily speculate on the price of uranium, but we do intend to keep a inventory somewhere between 100 and 500,000 pounds for the duration of the company, simply because as we add new projects on, we'll be having new contracts. In addition to the ones that are existing now. And we need to make sure that we've got an inventory to be able to deliver into the early front end months of those contracts, the time between startup and full commercial production. So we'll always have that. Obviously, we'll take advantage of swings in the market that give us unusually quick profits, but our main objective is to fulfill those contracts. We incidentally are making application before the end of the year for NASDAQ listing in the US. And that's something that everyone can look forward to, as it'll certainly increase our liquidity and our visibility considerably. I'm not going to give you a rundown on the board. I'm sure you're familiar with most of these folks. We'll mention Sandy McKay coming and joining our already very deep, talented board. She spent 20 years in the legal minerals business, 10 at Chevron Canada's lead counsel, and 10 years in the uranium industry. Blake Steele, CEO of Azarga, will continue on as their strategic advisor and essentially our Asian liaison based in Hong Kong. Blake's been able to develop quite a following among the funds in Asia. And of course, that is the cornerstone of the nuclear growth in terms of the number of plants, number of pounds consumed. So a very important part of the world. Just a couple other, most of the other folks, expansion potential. And Gas Hills, located in central Wyoming. And then you move down and you see a cluster of assets in New Mexico. Here again, we control over 50% of the New Mexico district. And then you see a cluster of assets in Texas, where of course we'll be getting started. The key point on this slide is the last one. Texas and Wyoming are agreement states. What that means is the NRC has ceded their regulatory authority to the states, and it certainly streamlines our efforts in terms of permitting, operations, and reclamation. Next, please. I'm not going to read all of the headlines to you, but the top one is really key. You've seen all of these headlines, but it's about the only thing that the U.S. Congress agrees on in terms of bipartisan support. And it's the first time we've enjoyed that really since 3 Mile Island 50 years ago. So I think we're positioned not for a usual 12 or 24 or 36-month rally in uranium, but really with the political support and the goals for new clean energy, I think we're looking at a decade or two of prosperity for the uranium industry, and we're really in the early innings of it. Thanks. Yeah, that in itself is put up against a backdrop of already an existing 55 million pound a year deficit in uranium. This is expected to grow significantly. It's somewhat of a dated number in the 154 nuclear reactors planned, as China's just announced another 100 of them. So what we're looking at is really an additional 50% demand pull on top of this already deficit position over the course of the next decade. China obviously leading the charge, but India, Middle East, Russia, Eastern European bloc countries, and of course Japan turning back to full utilizations is very important. U.S. remains the largest consumer of nuclear power and will probably do so through this decade, but obviously China will assume that position in due course. And obviously the market has been changed dramatically by Sprott and Kazatoprom's entry along with other funds to the market. I'm not going to go into details on the ISR process. If any of you have any questions on it, I'll be glad, Paul will be glad to take those during the Q&A session. So current work underway, Rosita plant modernization well underway. We've been on aggressive expansion of our Texas assets. Obviously, I haven't broadcast any of those acquisitions in terms of where they are because we aren't finished yet. And we like the competitive advantage we enjoy as an ore body. As I mentioned, we're going through systematically changing our 43-1 or changing our historic resources to 43-101. And we have a very sensible, systematic non-core asset divestment program that was illustrated by the Elephant Capital Evolving announcement sometime about a month ago, where we're taking our non-core assets and finding good homes with them, good homes for them with good technical people. These are non-ISR assets typically, and we'll typically take a 20% interest in the company, cash upfront payment, and send it off. And that's a good way to monetize those. And of course, we're also continually examining and assessing other opportunities for growth as we see further means for consolidation in the industry in the U.S. With that, we turn it over to Paul, and he can give you a bit of a rundown, starting off with our idealized production profile with the various assets going forward.
Thanks, Bill. You can see we're focused on our strategy of building a production pipeline that will basically create a continuous production feed that'll carry us well beyond 2027 and et cetera, as we continue to grow these projects. Starting in Texas, we've created the opportunity for near-term production with the acquisition of the Rosita and Kingsville Dome processing facilities through the Westwater transaction. And what we've done since that time is we began to develop and expand our resource base within Texas through acquisitions, et cetera. And also we're working to add those resources into a more formal form of a 43-101, starting with Butler Ranch. That's an exploration project we acquired through the Westwater transaction. It has significant historical resources that we're looking to convert to 43-101. We also have the Upper Spring Creek property, a project that we're currently expanding and developing right now. That one is a project that had been previously licensed and permitted by a prior operator, but never put into production, and basically released during low prices during this 10-year bear market we've experienced. And that gives us a good running start. It's a good fast track project to get us to meet our 2023 schedule. We're also continuing to add additional resources in South Texas to build out that long-term pipeline of production through additional properties we know about it within our current database, but also there's significant other properties that we're looking to acquire through lease or through fee as we continue to expand our production profile in South Texas and utilize our full capacities that we have with that Rosita and Kingsville Dome. As you can see, Rosita and Kingsville Dome are currently central processing plants. That is, we're going to be able to transport uranium-loaded resin from the individual well fields over some distance back to these plants and recover the uranium. It's a fairly common method of production in South Texas and Wyoming, and so it's a good business model for us to follow. The current capacity combined between the two facilities is about 1.6 million pounds per year, but that's only a limitation as a result of our current equipment. We have the ability to expand that capacity by basically bolting on additional drying and elution capacity, which is fairly simple to there. We have a portion of that equipment already on site, but we're going to be focusing on getting into production, so that's where our attention is going to be. So we're currently modernizing and actually building out the Rosita plant because it's more centrally located to the properties we're looking to bring into production in that short 2023 period. And then as that capacity gets taken up, and we'll be looking to expand there as well as bring in Kingsville Dome, which we're currently holding on standby as a production option as we see our production pipeline build out. One of the things that came with the Westwater transaction doesn't get picked up in some of the publications or at least our public information is that we also acquired these satellite facilities that we can easily relocate to these remote well fields. And that's important because when we talk about supply chain issues and that we hear about in the news, having existing equipment that's custom built provides us a rapid ability to move these facilities and get them into production. at relatively low cost. And that's the key thing right now is we see, even though we've seen uranium prices increase, still working on a low cost production profile is what our objective is as we advance these projects. Some of the work that's going on at Rosita, we've moved key critical equipment and installed it. Been inspecting installed equipment that's already there at Rosita, making sure that it's all functioning properly, and getting the dryer facilities and to code as well as production capable. We expect to get this work done by the end of the first quarter of 2022. Well on track so far. We're using all in-house technical and operational people to do this work. So the people who will actually be doing the operations are the ones who are doing the inspections and everything, so that they're very familiar with valves, et cetera. So the number of interruptions that could occur during startup are mitigated by having experienced personnel. Once Texas is in operation, we'll be focusing on developing out Dewey Burdock. This is an advanced project. It's received all its federal licenses and permits. There's some state permits that have to be executed that'll be done, and we expect that all the way through, all the permitting will be done the next 18 to 24 months. That fits perfectly and dovetails nicely within our Texas plans, allows us to begin developing Dewey Burdock as an additional pipeline production source, building on top of the success we see in Texas. And you can see here it's got substantial resources and really bolsters that production pipeline. In a 2020 PEA that was performed, it's got a strong mine life, production capability, and robust economics. Even as we see the uranium price moving up, we also expect that those economics will remain robust. Even when we would talk about cost increases around the industry, Dewey Burdock will remain very robust in that profile. And as Bill mentioned, we also have a pipeline project in Wyoming, the Gas Hills ISR project. It has significant resources. It's not as advanced as Dewey Burdock. That is, it hasn't had any permitting activities done. So once the transaction, we close this deal, even after the shareholder vote, we will begin to laying the groundwork for permitting and licensing the Gas Hills project. And being in Wyoming, that's important because we're just dealing strictly with the state for our licensing and most of our permits. And it's given the fact that we're adjacent to Cameco's Gas Hills project, we believe that the permitting and licensing will be relatively straightforward. The beauty of the Gas Hills district, it's a well-known uranium district with significant infrastructure already in place, and it has a historic production history there as well. So it's effectively a brownfield project. As you can see, a recent PEA shows very robust economics that gives us confidence that when we bring this into production following the startup of Dewey Burdock or begin developing this, it'll be an effective pipeline project that'll stack into that pipeline picture we showed you earlier. And that'll take us to New Mexico, where we see our greatest resource base, where we see the greatest long-term opportunity and production pipeline. As Bill mentioned, there are significant known resources, particularly what we control. We have over almost 50 million pounds of uranium indicated and indicated and inferred. An additional almost double that in historical mineral resources. And there's opportunities for even more with the growth out west in the checkerboard you see on the map, where we know there's known mineralization hits and that haven't been characterized yet that we believe could potentially double our resource in our portfolio. We currently have several projects which are ISR targets. As you can see, Nose Rock, Crown Point, Husta Butte, in addition to properties we acquired through the Westwater transaction, West Largo and Ambrosia Lake, that are going to round us out on our ISR capacity within New Mexico that we know about right now, notwithstanding what we may discover as we begin developing projects or properties in the future. Now, the timeline for this is still beyond the guest or Wyoming targets because the New Mexico is a much more complicated regulatory environment. It's going to take more work. In addition to that, we need to work with local communities as a result of historic uranium mining activities, which has created a bit of a history related to uranium mining that we need to work with local communities, in addition to our regulatory agencies to advance our projects. So we see that as a minimum of 5-year process, which we've already started. And one of the first projects is Crown Point House Butte that we expect to come on. It has substantial mineral resources. And that gets us to basically the summary of where we're at. We're building enCore to be the premier ISR uranium developer and near-term producer. We want to be one of the first movers in the industry to get into production. The first movers get rewarded first or earliest with a rising market. And we're going to leverage our current operating facilities in Texas to be able to get that to happen. We bring with that, as Bill mentioned, we have a very experienced workforce in addition to a management team. And let's not forget about the team we bring with Azarga too. They have an experienced team as well that can not only support the projects that Azarga brings to the table, but also help build out what we're doing in South Texas. And this gives us an opportunity to leverage these operations to eventually get to our New Mexico endowment and bring that into production, and also strengthen our hand with respect to market forces in the uranium industry, but also strengthen our ability to look at further consolidation to grow the company transactionally. And with that, I'll turn it over to Janet for questions.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you, Bill. Appreciate the presentation. There is the ability for anybody to ask any questions by typing them in under the question box. If you do so at this time, I also wanted to note that this presentation is being recorded and will be forwarded to you shortly after the meeting. If you have any other additional questions, you can reach us at info@encoreuranium.com. And also our website is encoreuranium.com, noting that we've just had a website name change. A couple of questions here. And maybe I'll give this to, if you could let us know the next steps now following the shareholder vote at Azarga.
Yeah, Paul, basically, I'll let Paul tie this off, but basically we have a few regulatory matters to get signatures off of, not a heck of a lot more than change of address, but the CFIUS review, which I believe has been completed or near completion, which has a foreign currency evaluation by the federal government. We also have to get court approval in the BC, which is here again after the shareholder vote, pretty much standard. And then also with since we're dealing with radiation, we have to get NRC approval for the transfer of the licenses. Here again, very standard procedure, but somewhat at the mercy of the speed of the government in terms of checking the boxes and getting it back to us.
I'll add, Bill, that we're working. We started the ground working on all these regulatory approvals prior to the shareholder vote, so we've got them well underway. We have received final approval by CFIUS on the transaction, and we're currently waiting on the court approval. And as Bill mentioned, we still have to go through the NRC. It's an indirect change of control, but there's a process that has to be followed. We expect those to get done as rapidly as possible, and we put significant resources to shorten that timeline to get to final closing, because we want to start executing on our plan as a complete company. Thank you.
Okay. When do you anticipate the NASDAQ listing?
Yeah, we're optimistic that we'll get it by the end of the year. That being said, we already have our symbol reserved, which is the same as it is in Canada, EU. we certainly qualify. Here again, if we get approval the last week of December after Christmas, we'll hold off until the first week of January, just because that's a bit of a downtime. But certainly we're still on timelines to get it by the end of this year.
Okay.
That is the major market. It's not the OTC. So.
Can you confirm cost estimates and timing for developing Dewey Burdock? I know you touched on this briefly. We had another question for a bit more information.
I'll take that one. We'll be continuing to evolve the cost estimate for Dewey Burdock, keeping in mind that that's a 2020 PEA, and we all know that PEAs have a bit of an error built into, they're preliminary. And so we will continue to refine those cost estimates, and over time we may be issuing an updated PEA sometime in the near future. No specific timing on that, but as we've seen cost increases occur, and we may see also improvements in technology that could actually mitigate some cost in various areas. This gives us we'll be reviewing that and continuously looking at the economics of all of our projects, and where necessary or when the timing's right, we may be publishing an updated PEA for Dewey Burdock and or others as well.
Okay. A bit of a longer question, so maybe if you can summarize, the question is, what does the post-merger balance sheet look like, and what does the proposed capital spend look like in the next 12 to 24 months?
I'll take the first part of that, and then we'll pass it over to Paul. We've got about combined balance sheets about 20 million in cash, no debt. That's Canadian dollars. That is inclusive of the 100,000 pounds of inventory currently on the books, and it's certainly adequate for 2022. Although I would be pushing it towards the end of that with the development plans. But in terms of specifics, I have turned it over to Paul.
For 2022, our capital spend is expected to be between $2.5 to $3 million. And then 2023, we'll be spending approximately $5 to $10 million to take everything into production. And I'm giving a range because we're attacking this on multiple fronts within Texas. We're advancing several properties simultaneously, and depends on timing. If everything comes together, the higher number will be more likely. But those are the reasonable ranges we're looking at right now to get into production.
Thank you. A question relating to Aboriginal relations at the Dewey Burdock project. What is the status?
I'll take that one.
Sure.
Of course, if we have, the Aboriginal issues are related to the license transfer, the license itself, not the transfer. Currently, the Ogallala Sioux, which is the tribe that's challenging the licenses, it's currently a challenge on our license and our permits, focused on tribal consultations, and that's currently being heard by the DC Circuit Court of Appeals. The oral arguments were last week, and we'll wait to see what the court decides. We prevailed. The company is, and actually it's the NRC that's actually advancing this. So far the NRC has prevailed. The courts have sided with the NRC, and we expect to do the same with the EPA as well. As far as the direct relationships, it's we're coming into this transaction. So we actually, as far as enCore is concerned, we actually haven't had any direct relationships with the local tribal communities. I believe that Azarga has done most of that work, and where progress is made, it's been successful. But most of our interactions have been focusing on New Mexico in the past. So.
Yeah, I would just add that unfortunately, due to budgetary constraints of a small company, Azarga has been limited in terms of their on the ground game, and in terms of the time and effort going into the communities. And we certainly, just as a matter of course and a matter of our corporate policy, will ramp that up considerably.
Thank you. Question for you, Bill. It's a changing game in uranium and a lot of mergers and acquisitions. What do you think the future looks like in the sector?
Wow, is that a narrow question? No, it certainly requires a bit of a crystal ball, but here again, I think it really goes down to the basics of this is not, in my opinion, in our board's opinion, which has been very accurate on calling the price in general terms since before 2000, I'd point out. We see the market as being the first time in over 50 years that we've got a sustainable nuclear business. We've had these little flashes in the pan. 86 was one of them. The biggest one people remember obviously was the 2005-2007 rally, which was 30 months. While there just is not a lot of strength or length. There's been strength, but not length to these rallies or these nuclear renaissances. This one is set to go for quite a while, maybe indefinitely in terms of the timeframes that we look at. I think a decade is very conservative, and it's just focused on green energy and lessening our reliance upon fossil fuels. You can't get there without nuclear. So I think that's very important. I think similarly with the U.S. Consuming roughly 20% of the world's nuclear supply and producing virtually none of it, it's an incredible opportunity, perhaps a better opportunity in the U.S. than anywhere else, and that's one of the reasons we're focused there. Especially in situ, most of the world's uranium is produced, certainly over 50% of it's produced by in situ means. We've got an elite team that's dedicated to in situ. Certainly some of them have had some conventional experience, but the real expertise lies in situ. And with this elite team and the, literally uranium's not scarce. It's the 8th most abundant element on Earth. What is scarce is the technology and technical expertise of the people. As you might imagine, over a 50-year period with only limited periods of prosperity, we've lost several generations of technical expertise in terms of uranium mining and extraction. So to be able to have a complete team that understands the entire fuel cycle from production through sales, through conversion, enrichment, fabrication, contracting, and ultimately reclamation is a real key asset for us going forward and integral to making a really dominating company. And so I think the future is bright. There's certainly still opportunities for consolidation in the U.S., both private and publicly. We certainly evaluate those, not saying that they will happen, but we're certainly keen on that. It served us well in the past and to date in this company. So I think, I don't think any of us fully appreciate the limit on it yet. And, if anything, the amount of money going into the industry this time compared to the last time in 04, 05 to 07 is far greater amount of money. Really the same number of names or less, and especially those that actually will get into production is only a handful, and that's on a worldwide basis. So there's really a few places for money to go that's going to see a real return on it, and we'll be a real beneficiary of that. And it certainly facilitates the production, especially when you have very moderate or minor capex, especially in terms of the mining industry, incredibly small capex. So it looks very bright.
Thanks, Bill. Just to follow up to that, and then I have another question for Paul. Does enCore intend to remain focused on the United States and ISR versus expansion beyond the US and conventional?
Good question, and yes and yes. The opportunities in the US, as you can see just from that map in front of you, and as illustrated by our asset base, when you look at our historical assets, which we are converting systematically to 43101, plus our 99 million pounds of 43101 at the current time, we're clearly pushing 200 million pounds of resource. That's an enormous chunk. We're certainly not sitting on that and being satisfied with it. We're looking to increase it. So yes, we think that we've got the makings of a world-class company just here in the US in terms of opportunity. And as again, our staff and even our active board that's involved on this on a daily basis is basically recruited or put together strictly for ISR. And it would be highly unusual and a decade down the road or more before we might even consider anything other than that or other than the US. So that's strictly what we're looking at. And as mentioned with our non-core asset disposal program, our monetization program is a better word because they're quality projects. They just aren't ISRable. And so we'd prefer to put them in the hands of somebody that wants to go the conventional route while we concentrate on our much better tier 1 ISR projects. So yes, we are going to stay focused on the US and in ISR.
Thank you. Paul, there's a number of questions that relate to offtake agreements and contracts and suitable timing and appropriate timing for this. Are you engaged in it? So maybe just have a little bit of a conversation on the process around those discussions.
Sure. Well, back in, I believe it was late August, maybe, actually, I think it was early September, we announced that we had executed an offtake agreement with UG, which is a subsidiary of Uranium. And that was set up, it's a market-based or spot-based contract for a 5-year period for 2 million, for a quantity of 2 million pounds a year. We like that contract very much because it, in a time when, back when we signed that contract, the price of uranium was still still in the low, in the 30s, et cetera. And so knowing if we believe what we know, we see in the market and where we expect prices to be, this gives the ability to take advantage of spot prices as a rising market, but also provides us a place to sell our uranium directly to a third party, receiving spot prices, and but also not chasing the spot price by us entering material. This material can go into their own the third parties' contracts, et cetera, itself for delivery. So as a result, we see it's a good, robust project, which gave us confidence to start really advancing our projects in South Texas. It starts in 2023 and carries through to 2028. We're also negotiating, we're in the process of discussions on other potential offtake agreements with utilities. We hope to have some news on that in the near future, but that's been ongoing. We're seeing additional interest from utilities. In fact, Bill and I attended the NEI conference in Savannah, Georgia last week and met with several utilities at that conference and found that there is some timing with respect to when we see contracts coming in. It certainly won't be this year or next year that we'll see deliveries occurring in those contracts, but we'll see RFPs in the near term where deliveries could be 2025, 2026 and beyond as utilities begin to address their open contracting that they are open needs. The good thing we've seen is that the utilities we're talking to are the ones that are talking about life extensions on their power plants for another 20 to 40 years. And that gives us, that shows that there's a robust demand side. So we're continuing to advance, talk to utilities, but also responding to RFPs that come in and make sense. We feel pretty good about where the market is, and hopefully we'll have some news on executing on some additional offtake agreements. I can tell you that the utilities are far more receptive to talking about particularly U.S. producers, supplying uranium to them, and because our price, where the uranium price is, that conversation's gotten a lot easier, much easier to have than 2 years ago or 3 years ago when prices were much, much lower. So again, we're not going to be giving up a lot of our upside with the current contract we have, or any upside. We'll be able to receive that when the market moves, and we'll see where things go with respect to the contracting that goes along, and we'll keep our shareholders up to date on that.
Thank you, Paul.
I would just add that, during the meetings at NEI and our discussions led by Paul and, Richard and Mark on the board, our objective is to get a book of contracts that, are some market related, some fixed cost plus, and so that way we preserve an operational margin, but leave ourselves exposed fully to the upside, or as fully as possible. So it's a blended approach, and with Paul's expertise and Richard's in that end, I think we're going to be very well served with that.
Thank you. There are a lot of questions on enCore's work in the regulatory framework, DOE. I probably can't get to all of them because we're getting a little short of time. But Paul, do you want to just do a bit of a quick summary on some of the work that's ongoing behind the scenes?
Sure. So, we've got a couple of initiatives that we're working on right now, in addition to what we're doing on a regulatory scale outside of just our focus. So on the regulatory side, we're currently doing some license amendment work to bring in these our Upper Spring Creek project into the Rosita license, as well as doing permitting work. All that's already started. We've also, some of the areas we're focusing on within our Texas activities is also related to we're doing some well field drilling at Rosita. All that's with our current license and permit. So that one we'll see fast tracking through the system. So we're actively engaged. We've got a good team of people and brought in some help to help us with getting that done. On a more macro scale, as a company, we've been involved with the trade associations. As some people may know, I spent quite a bit of time working at with regulatory agencies on rulemakings, as well as government policy work, et cetera. So some of the initiatives that I've been focusing on right now is obviously the uranium reserve that the DOE is currently putting together. Although we don't, we see that currently funded at 75 million. We believe that there's going to be extensions to that and increasing up to 150 million a year. If we're given an opportunity where it makes sense, we may be participating in that. But first of all, we got to get the program to go so that we at least have that ability to, as a company, to be able to take advantage of it as needed. There is a desire from a public policy perspective within the U.S. government for U.S. uranium production. And for a couple of reasons. One is that to have a secure supply chain of fuel for our current nuclear fleet. They're not looking at 100% coverage, but they're looking at least having some ability to have a secure supply chain. And the Secretary of Energy, Granholm, has stated that in her testimony during her confirmation hearings. The other one, and that's what this Uranium Reserve Program is intended to address, is to begin building out the most vulnerable portions of that supply chain. The other thing is that the U.S. government, as we continue to expand the needs for microreactors for Department of Defense, advancing small modular reactors, we're looking to find additional sources of fuel. Particularly where the U.S. government has a role to play, U.S. origin material is going to be a key part of that to advance that program. So we've been working closely with the NEI, with the Uranium Producers of America, even National Mining Association, to work with the DOE as well as other agencies within Department of Defense to look at ways to advance those programs and to help provide a means for a domestic supply chain. We're also doing some work on the rulemaking side with respect to the federal government. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission is advancing a rulemaking, which will basically create a ISR specific regulations. In my opinion, this is a good move because right now they're addressing it through license conditions. Now, the state of Texas and state of Wyoming have their own rules that are part of the agreement state program, but not all states, including where Dewey Burdock is in an agreement state. So it's important that the NRC create a rulemaking that provides a solid source support for advancing our projects by having rules that actually address the way we operate rather than doing a backfit through the licenses. And this fills a gap that's been needed to be filled. Prior activities by EPA, where they've withdrawn their rulemaking, this provides a clear path to having a good set of uniform rules in the U.S. So we've been focusing on that. And also we're working with trade associations on the Department of Interior's critical minerals designation for uranium, which is a key thing, I think, in my opinion. Having uranium as a critical mineral is important for setting government policy. I don't see it advancing or creating any openings with respect to permitting and licensing. I think we've got a good, rigorous, well understood permitting and licensing process that we know has warts on it, but we know what those warts are and we manage those warts. But what we see is we need the U.S. government creating its policies around a robust, secure supply chain of uranium in the United States, because currently the U.S. is importing almost 100% of its uranium, and that's, when you look at it from a national security perspective and energy security perspective, we see a need to have a strong, robust industry in order to support our growth in our nuclear programs if we're going to be serious about clean energy. And also advancing these small modular reactors, we've got to have a source of fuel for them, and we're better to do it than the United States. We do it more efficiently in the United States. We're economically competitive, and also our environmental regulations in the U.S. are, when you look at that growth from an ESG perspective, we probably would be one of the leading areas in the world for advancing uranium production in the world. And Bill, you want to add anything?
The only thing I'd add is those projections of ever increasing deficits in the supply-demand curve don't even factor in the small modular reactors. That's just the conventional reactor base loads. So, there's just more fuel for the fire, so to speak, in terms of demand with the SMRs.
Oh, thank you both. I have a lot of other questions, but it just seems like that's a really good place to end with a nice summary of the work that's ongoing behind the scenes in the sector and the strength of the sector. Maybe what I'll just ask is if either of you have any final wrap-up comments, and then I'll wrap everything up. So, Paul, anything that you wanted to add that may have been missed today?
Well, I'm not sure we missed anything, but I just want to add that with the shareholder vote for the Azarga shareholders, that gives us that basically approves the transaction and basically validates our growth plan and our strategy for becoming the premier ISR uranium producer in the U.S. And that gives us a lot of confidence going forward on our execution, and we're going to continue to look for opportunities to make it even a stronger strategy.
Thank you. Bill, any final comments from you?
No, other than we've got a very action-packed, we've obviously been very busy in the last 15 months. I expect that pace to quicken as we move forward, and certainly won't let up. So the news flow will be stronger than ever. And of course, some real key fundamentals, new 43-101s coming in, completion of the updates on the plant in Q2 next year, development of the well field late next year with production in 23. And, of more immediate significance is the visibility and liquidity increase that we're going to see with the NASDAQ listing. So exciting times indeed. And I think we're, again, I'll reiterate, I think we're in the early innings of the nuclear renaissance. So glad to have so many people tune in and support enCore's efforts going on. And as always, we remain available to answer any further questions.
Well, thank you both very much for a great presentation, and thank you to all the attendees for your participation. We do appreciate your time. And if we didn't answer any of your questions, we do have a list and we will reach out to you after. Please do feel free to reach out to us at any time at info@encoreuranium.com. I'm happy to take any and all questions that may have been missed in here as well. Thank you again. This is being recorded and will be forwarded to everybody, so it will be in your inbox soon. Thank you again, everybody, and thank you, Bill and Paul. Have a wonderful day. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Jan. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.